The marriage of vengeance. Vincent Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, staring at the city lights below with cold, calculating eyes. To the world, he was a brilliant CEO who had built an empire from nothing. But beneath the polished exterior lived a man haunted by memories that refused to fade. His childhood had been shattered when Catherine Bennett entered his father's life, destroying his parents' marriage with her charm and manipulation. Vincent's mother had withered away in heartbreak, dying alone while his father remained blind to the devastation he had caused. That betrayal had carved a hollow space in Vincent's chest, filled only with rage and the burning desire for revenge. For years, Vincent had tracked Catherine's every move, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Then, fate delivered Sophia Bennett into his path. Catherine's daughter worked as a junior accountant in one of his subsidiary companies, living a modest life while caring for her ailing mother. Sophia was everything Vincent hadn't expected, gentle and hard-working, with kind eyes that seemed incapable of deceit. But Vincent saw her only as a tool, a means to inflict the same suffering his mother had endured. He would marry Sophia, trap her in a loveless union, and ultimately destroy her just as Catherine had destroyed his family. Vincent's approach was methodical and deliberate. He arranged chance encounters, appearing at the coffee shop Sophia frequented before work. He sent flowers to her desk with handwritten notes that spoke of admiration. He learned her favorite books, her dreams, the way she worried constantly about her mother's medical bills. Each piece of information became ammunition in his carefully constructed plan. Sophia was hesitant at first, unable to understand why someone like Vincent would notice someone like her. But his persistence wore down her defenses, and the financial burden she carried made his offers of help increasingly difficult to refuse. The proposal came on a rainy evening when Sophia was at her most vulnerable. Her mother had just been hospitalized again, and the bills were mounting beyond what Sophia could manage. Vincent found her in the hospital waiting room, exhausted and tearful. He sat beside her, taking her trembling hand in his. His words were perfectly crafted, speaking of how she had captured his heart, how he wanted to share her burdens, how he could ensure her mother received the best possible care. The diamond ring he presented was enormous, glittering under the harsh hospital lights. Sophia looked at him with confusion and disbelief, but when he promised to pay for all her mother's treatments, she found herself unable to say no. Her acceptance tasted like ash in her mouth, but she told herself it was for her mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her. The wedding was a spectacle that dominated social media and gossip columns. Vincent spared no expense, transforming a historic mansion into a fairy tale venue. Sophia moved through the preparations in a daze, feeling increasingly like a beautiful doll being posed for photographs. The designer gown was exquisite, the flowers were perfect, and hundreds of guests filled the ballroom to witness their union. But as Sophia stood at the altar looking into Vincent's eyes, she saw no warmth, no love, only an emptiness that sent chills down her spine. When they exchanged vows, his voice was flat and mechanical. The kiss he gave her was brief and cold, more obligation than affection. The wedding night unfolded in Vincent's sprawling estate, where Sophia was led to the master bedroom. She stood nervously by the window, still wearing her wedding gown, unsure what to expect. Vincent entered the room, loosening his tie with slow, deliberate movements. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, something between contempt and curiosity. Sophia's hands trembled as she tried to understand the man she had just married. Vincent approached her, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He stood close enough that she could feel his breath, his eyes searching her face as if looking for something specific. Then Vincent spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like ice. He told her the truth with brutal honesty, each word carefully, chosen to inflict maximum pain. He explained who she was to him, not a beloved wife, but the daughter of the woman who had destroyed his family. He described his mother's suffering in vivid detail, the nights she cried herself to sleep, the way she faded away while Catherine Bennett lived in luxury. Sophia listened in growing horror, her face draining of color as she realized the true nature of their marriage. Vincent wanted her to understand that this union was not about love, but about revenge, about making Catherine's daughter experience the same loneliness and despair his mother had endured. Sophia felt the room spinning around her. She wanted to deny his accusations, to defend her mother, but the certainty in Vincent's eyes told her he had proof of everything he claimed. Her mother, the woman she had loved and admired her entire life, had been the cause of such terrible suffering. The guilt crashed over her like a wave, mixing with the betrayal of realizing Vincent had never cared for her at all. She was nothing more than a pawn in his game of revenge. Tears streamed down her face as she processed the cruelty of her situation. She had been so naive, believing that someone like Vincent could truly love someone like her. Vincent expected Sophia to break down completely, to beg for mercy or lash out in anger, but instead, she simply wiped her tears and looked at him with heartbreaking dignity. She apologized quietly for her mother's actions, even though she had known nothing about them. Then she asked him what he wanted from her now. Vincent was caught off guard by her composure. He had planned for hysterics, for dramatic scenes that would satisfy his need for revenge. Instead, Sophia's quiet acceptance left him feeling strangely unsatisfied. He told her coldly that she would remain his wife in name only, living in his home but receiving none of the warmth or affection a real marriage would offer. She would experience the same isolation his mother had felt. The days that followed were marked by painful silence. Sophia moved through the enormous house like a ghost, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy despite the constant reminder of her loveless marriage. She continued visiting her mother in the hospital, never revealing the truth about Vincent's motives. Catherine was so happy about the wedding, believing her daughter had found security and love. Sophia couldn't bear to shatter that illusion, especially as her mother's health continued to decline. At home, Vincent maintained his cold distance, barely acknowledging Sophia's presence. Yet he noticed things he hadn't expected to see. Sophia never complained about his treatment. Instead, she quietly went about creating small acts of kindness that he didn't request and certainly didn't deserve. She learned how he preferred his morning coffee and had it ready before he came downstairs. She noticed when he worked late and left a simple dinner warming in the oven. When he came home with tension evident in his shoulders, she would quietly dim the harsh lights in the living room without saying a word. These gestures were never accompanied by attempts to gain his favor or manipulate him. They seemed to come from genuine thoughtfulness, from a person who couldn't help but care for others despite her own suffering. Vincent found himself increasingly disturbed by Sophia's behavior. She should have been bitter and resentful, but instead she maintained a grace that reminded him uncomfortably of his own mother. The woman he had married to destroy was nothing like the calculating seductress he had imagined Catherine's daughter would be. Late at night, he would find himself watching Sophia as she sat by the window, lost in thought. The moonlight would catch the tears on her cheeks, tears she tried to hide during the day. Something twisted in Vincent's chest when he saw her pain, an unfamiliar sensation that felt dangerously close to regret. The awakening of love 3. Months into their marriage, Vincent noticed a change beginning within himself that he couldn't explain or control. Sophia's presence in his home had become less like an unwelcome reminder of revenge and more like a gentle constant he found himself anticipating. He caught himself listening for her footsteps in the morning, noticing when she seemed more tired than usual, feeling concern when she returned from the hospital with red-rimmed eyes. These feelings terrified him because they contradicted everything his plan had been built upon. Revenge was supposed to be satisfying, but instead he felt increasingly empty. One particularly difficult evening, Vincent returned home to find Sophia collapsed on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered medical bills and hospital reports. She had been crying so hard that she hadn't heard him enter. Catherine's condition had worsened significantly, and the doctors were saying there was little more they could do. Sophia's shoulders shook with silent sobs as she clutched one of the reports, her grief so raw and genuine that Vincent felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. Without thinking, he moved toward her, kneeling beside her trembling form. Sophia looked up in surprise when she felt his hand gently touch her shoulder. She tried to compose herself to hide her vulnerability, but the grief was too overwhelming. Vincent found himself pulling her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest while he murmured words of comfort that surprised him with their sincerity. He felt her fingers clutch his shirt as she sobbed, and the trust implicit in that gesture shook him deeply. This woman he had set out to destroy was seeking comfort from him, the architect of her suffering. The realization of what he had done, the cruelty of his actions, hit Vincent with devastating force. In the weeks that followed, Vincent found himself spending more time at home, unable to focus on work when he knew Sophia was struggling alone. He began accompanying her to the hospital, standing silently by her side as she held her mother's hand. Catherine was weak and fading, but she smiled whenever she saw them together, believing her daughter had found happiness. The guilt Vincent felt in those moments was almost unbearable. He watched Sophia care for her mother with such devotion, reading to her, brushing her hair, telling stories from their past. The love between them was genuine and beautiful, making Vincent question everything he had believed about Catherine's character. One quiet afternoon, while Catherine slept, Sophia turned to Vincent with exhausted eyes and said something that changed everything. She told him that despite knowing the truth about their marriage, despite understanding his hatred, she didn't blame him for his anger. Her mother had made terrible mistakes, and Sophia carried the weight of that knowledge every day. But she asked him to consider that people were complex, capable of both terrible choices and genuine love. Catherine had raised her alone after Sophia's father abandoned them, working multiple jobs and sacrificing everything to give her daughter opportunities she never had. Sophia's words weren't an excuse but rather an invitation to see the full humanity in a situation Vincent had reduced to simple villainy. Catherine Bennett passed away peacefully one spring morning with Sophia holding one hand and Vincent surprisingly holding the other. In her final moments, Catherine looked at Vincent and whispered an apology, her eyes full of regret for the pain she had caused his family so many years ago. She thanked him for taking care of her daughter, believing until the end that their marriage was real. After she was gone, Sophia sat motionless, staring at her mother's still form with such profound grief that Vincent felt his own eyes burning with unexpected tears. He realized in that moment that revenge had never been about justice. It had been about avoiding his own pain by inflicting it on others. The days following the funeral were the quietest Vincent had ever experienced. Sophia moved through the house, like a shadow, lost in her grief. Vincent found himself unable to maintain his cold distance. He stayed home from work, quietly preparing meals she barely touched, sitting nearby without speaking because he didn't know what to say. One evening, he found her in the bedroom they had never truly shared, packing her belongings into a small suitcase. His heart clenched with unexpected panic as he realized she was leaving. When he asked where she was going, Sophia looked at him with empty eyes and said she saw no reason to stay anymore. Her mother was gone, and their arrangement no longer served any purpose. Vincent felt something inside him break completely. He crossed the room in 3 strides, taking the suitcase from her hands and setting it aside. Then he did something he had never imagined doing. He fell to his knees before her, his pride completely shattered. He told her the truth he had been fighting for months. He loved her. Somewhere between his calculated revenge and her quiet resilience, between her acts of kindness and her profound grief, he had fallen deeply and irrevocably in love with her. He apologized for everything, for his cruelty, for using her, for the pain he had deliberately inflicted. He told her he didn't deserve her forgiveness, but he was begging for it anyway because the thought of losing her was more painful than any suffering he had ever known. Sophia looked down at him with tears streaming down her face. She told him she had discovered something unexpected as well. Despite everything, despite knowing he had married her for revenge, she had developed feelings for him that frightened her. She had seen glimpses of the man beneath the anger, the person capable of gentleness and real emotion. But she didn't know if she could trust those feelings, didn't know if what they had could ever become something real and genuine. Vincent stood, taking her hands in his, and promised that if she gave him a chance, he would spend every day proving that his love was real, that he could be the husband she deserved rather than the villain he had been. 2 months later, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified her because she still wasn't certain their relationship could survive its dark beginning. But when she told Vincent, she saw something in his eyes that convinced her to hope. He placed his hand gently on her stomach, his expression full of wonder and fear and love. He told her this child represented a new beginning, a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of his revenge. Over the following months, Vincent transformed completely. He attended every doctor's appointment, read parenting books obsessively, and began therapy to address the trauma and anger that had defined him for so long. Their daughter was born on a sunny October morning, tiny and perfect with Sophia's gentle eyes. Vincent held her with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he marveled at the miracle of her existence. He named her Hope, because that was what Sophia and their child had given him. Hope that he could be better than his worst impulses. That love was more powerful than hatred. Sophia watched him with their daughter and saw the man she had always suspected existed beneath his armor. They had traveled a dark path to reach this moment, but standing in that hospital room with their newborn between them, they both knew they had finally found their way home. Vincent leaned over to kiss Sophia's forehead, whispering that she and Hope were his redemption, the family he never knew he needed, and the love he would spend his life protecting and cherishing. Their story had begun with vengeance, but it would continue with love, forgiveness, and the beautiful possibility of second chances. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more beautiful love stories like this.